Here I'm going to be giving 5 braking tips to help with your sim racing experience, and yeah, I know there's heaps of braking tutorials out on YouTube, and to be honest I haven't actually watched any of them, so this is all going to be my own sort of personal thoughts, and I hope that I don't repeat too much of what's already out there, so let's get into it. Alright, so the first tip and issue that we're going to be having a look at here is braking too late and coming off of the brake too late into corners. First I'm going to show you an example here of the ideal line and the ideal braking point into the turn. So we'll just play this forward a bit. Alright, so we're at Bathurst, going down to the first turn. The ideal braking point is somewhere between the 50 and the 100 board. Right here, and then we're going to lift off the throttle, carry some speed through the apex and accelerate at the apex using all the track on the exit, and out we go. Now we're going to be looking at what I mentioned earlier, and that would be braking too late and coming off the brake pedal too late. When you brake too late into a turn, you end up having to slow the car down more than you would usually have to. So that means you get deeper into the corner by the time you're able to reach the apex. So you have to slow down more, square up the corner more, which is making your turning radius a lot tighter, and then you're accelerating out the corner quite late, and you end up having a slow exit. Ideally, you want to be coming off of that brake pedal earlier, flowing through the apex, accelerating at the apex, and using all the track on exit, which is... Well, now we're going to be taking a look at braking too late. So if I'm going to play this forward now. Alright, so heading back down to the first corner again. This time I'm going to be braking later than what I should be. So getting on the brakes late and realizing we've carried too much speed into the corner, holding the brakes for too long, and we end up missing the apex and having a terrible exit. And here's another example. In this case, I'm actually braking at the right point, but I'm still holding the brake too long, and I'm waiting too long to coast or let go of the brake into the turn. So there again, I'm tightening my corner up too much and not carrying enough speed through the turn, and then having another poor exit. So playing it forward again, we're going towards the braking point. I'll brake in a fairly good spot, and just waiting too long to come off the brakes, screwing up that corner, and the exit's not very good. Another thing worth mentioning is the difference between braking in the right spot and braking a little bit too late is so small. At the end of the day, it's down to your consistency, so it's worth having some solid reference points. Make sure you're braking in the same spot every time, and not braking too late. This is a quick comparison between the good attempt that I made and the bad attempt. Good on the top, bad on the bottom. As you'll see, on the bad attempt I brake a little bit later, and you'll see I also come off the brakes a little bit later. And as you see at the bottom, I'm a little bit wider than I am at the top. Top I make the apex, I'm out of the corner nice and smooth, and then in comparison you can see how much time I've lost there. Now for the second tip, and this tip is a braking tip that's also related to your racecraft. So maybe you're not so spatially aware, then you need, when you're racing with other people, when you're behind somebody, when it comes into the braking zones, you need to be making sure you're braking earlier than usual, so that you don't run into the rear of the car in front of you. And I suggest throughout the entire braking zone, maintain at least a car length gap, or maybe even 2. However, if you're more spatially aware, then you can become a little bit more racy. You can get right under somebody's bumper into the braking zones if you're confident that you can consistently do this without hitting them. You have to be serious with yourself, and if you're not spatially aware, and if you're not confident that you can consistently avoid somebody's rear bumper, you need to be braking earlier. Now, it doesn't really matter how spatially aware you are. When you're approaching another car that's maybe slower than you and you haven't raced with them yet, I would always suggest to be braking earlier. I've seen countless scenarios where a faster car is approaching another car, and as soon as they're within about a second, they plow right into the other car's rear bumper because the other car in front tends to brake earlier than them, and it ends in disaster. So for example, this car right here in front of me, I'm not right up behind it just yet, but I'm more cautious because I've got no idea where they're going to be braking. They may be a really good driver, they may not be. And if you do run into the rear of them, you're not going to be only spoiling their race, but you're also going to be spoiling your own race. So as you approach them, be cautious, learn their sort of braking style, and then judge how you're going to be braking after that. If they're braking early, you can use it as a weakness to take advantage of, to maybe send a dive up the inside into a corner. If their braking points are erratic and they're not always braking in the same point, I would suggest to hold back for a while and wait until they make a mistake, then you can hopefully sneak through. And as you gain confidence, you can brake later and get closer to them. as long as you're confident that you're not going to run into the rear of them. I would always suggest when you're this close to somebody that you start beginning to push on the brake early, and then as soon as you see the rear brake lights come on, then you begin to press harder on the brakes. So right now we're heading towards the last corner. I'm right behind this guy, and I'm going to start pressing on the brake pedal early, and as I see his brake lights come on, I'm going to be a bit more confident that I'm not going to run into the rear of him. Okay, one more time, heading towards the last corner, right up behind this guy's rear bumper. I'm going to start touching the brake early, just hit the brakes, and I can start braking. And he's actually broke quite late into the turn, so I've got to be cautious on my exit that I don't run into the rear of him. That's the idea. You've got to be extra cautious so that you don't hit people in the braking zone, because it happens way too often. My next tip is more directed at iRacing. It does help a little bit in other sims too, but I find it most helpful in iRacing, and that would be pedals with rumble kits, or adding rumble kits to a set of pedals that doesn't have it already. And I say this because braking in iRacing's a bit different than other simulators. You seriously get punished for locking up or running into the ABS in iRacing than other sims. And what I found in iRacing is that rumble, especially on the brake pedal, it does help a lot with the feeling of ABS when you're pressing the brake too hard into corners. And if you can learn to balance that braking pressure just before the ABS, so you're using the most out of the brakes without locking up or without hitting the ABS, you're going to get the most of the time out of your lap. This one addition to your sim rig really can help, but you do have to pay attention to that vibration on the brake pedal, and you have to learn to balance your brake pressure just below that point of vibration. In some sims I can't quite understand what the vibration's doing on the pedal. It seems to brake as soon as I touch the pedal, so it's not too informative. For me though, it seems like iRacing has the best information when it comes to that brake vibration. My fourth tip is about how you brake into a turn. When you get into the braking zone, you should start with the highest pressure, and then as you get to the turning in point, trail off the brakes and turn through the corner, lifting off the brakes completely and accelerating again out the corner. But what I've seen quite a lot of times is sometimes people accidentally brake a little bit too early, then they let off of the brake pedal again, and then a little bit later in the braking zone, they get back on the brakes. But unfortunately, once you've let off of the brake, you're carrying too much speed into the turn, and then you end up overshooting the corner, and you miss the apex, and you have a terrible exit. So avoid lifting off of the brake pedal and getting back on it, because nearly all of the time you're going to overshoot the corner. If you broke too early, ideally you should just lift off of the brake pedal a little bit, but keep the pressure down so you're still slowing into the corner. Another thing that I've noticed is sometimes when people enter a braking zone, initially they apply too little braking pressure, and then as they get deeper into the braking zone, they press harder on the brake pedal. So there's two issues here. Especially in a downforce car, as you slow down, you begin to lose the downforce, and you're more susceptible to locking up when you press hard on the brakes. So you're likely to lock up if you're doing that method of braking. And the other thing is that you're probably going to overshoot the corner. You're going to brake too little initially, and when you realize you're not going to make the corner, you start hitting the brakes, and then you've already missed the apex, and again having a terrible exit. So we're going to run through a couple examples here and have a look at what this actually looks like. So, as you probably noticed there, by the time I'd gotten back on the brakes, I was way too wide, lost a lot of time, missed the apex, bad corner. Now this time I'm going to do the similar thing. I'm not going to let off of the brake pedal, I'm just going to initially apply too little pressure and build the pressure as I get deeper into the braking zone. Now, similar story. By the time I realised I wasn't going to make the corner, I started applying more brake. I still didn't make the corner. And now I'm going to try to take this corner the right way and brake properly. Now, it wasn't the perfect corner, but you got the idea. I initially got right on the brakes, and as I got to the turning point, I started trailing off the brakes and gripping through the corner. My fifth tip isn't so much about making you go faster. It's more so about keeping you safe and stopping you from losing time. Another thing that's quite common is that if you're right behind somebody and you lift quite early into a corner, or for maybe some other reason you've lifted really early into a corner, it's easy to think that because you've lifted early into the corner that you don't really need to brake because you're going slower, right? The car doesn't sound like it's revving much, it just feels like you're going slower. But no, you're still actually carrying a lot of speed into the turn, so you need to make sure you get on the brakes at some point so you make the turn. Because if you don't, if you're just lightly pressing about 10% on the brakes, you're going to overshoot and fly into the grass on the other side of the corner, or you're going to hit the person in front of you. You've got to make sure that even if you're coasting into a corner, you've lifted early, or even if you're just cruising around, you still have to brake into the turn. Even if it's later than usual, you still have to brake. Let's do an example right here. So I don't exactly have anybody around me right now, so I can't use somebody else running into them as an example, but let's just pretend maybe we're in a safety car period. We're going to shift up to 6th gear, running low revs, trying to save some fuel, you know, just cruising around, maybe trying to catch up to the back of the safety car train, going down the main straight, just cruising along. The revs are low, right, so it doesn't sound like we're going very fast, but right now I'm still carrying 170 km per hour, so it might sound like I'm not going fast, but once I reach the apex I might realise, oh, I'm going a bit fast. And I didn't quite go all the way off the track there, but something as simple as that, if you're carrying a lot of speed and you don't realise how much speed you're carrying, you might end up shooting off the track, causing an incident, crashing, damaging your car, anything like that. So it's just something to keep in mind. So those were my 5 main tips, but I do have a special mention. This gets talked about quite frequently, especially over the last few years in sim racing. It's a very important skill to learn and it will help you go faster. And that would be trail braking. When you're braking into a corner, you begin to turn in, you're lifting off the brake, but you keep a little bit of pressure on the brakes to help the weight move to the front of the car. You get a little bit more grip on the front and helps the car turn in. In the last few weeks I've been driving the Jetta in iRacing. It's quite fun to drive. It's stupidly slow, but it's quite easy to drive. But one thing I've noticed in medium to high speed corners in this car is that you can really gain a lot of time if you float the car into the corner by using the brake pedal. That's right, you don't only have to use the steering wheel to turn the car, you can use the brakes as well. This particular method doesn't work for all cars. I mean, you should be trail braking in pretty much everything you drive. This entry slide sort of thing doesn't work for every car, you'll have to give it a go, but if it's a viable option for your car, definitely get onto it and practice the technique because it'll help you gain time. I'm going to show an example right here with me driving the Jetta at Red Bull Ring, and you know the 2 long corners in the middle? I don't know the name, I'm sorry, but I'll show you right here. Okay, so I'm going to approach the corner here, open up the track, give myself a nice entry, watch the brake trace, I barely use it at all, and watch the steering wheel as well. Barely any steering input, and just letting the car float to the apex, get to the apex, and get on the throttle again, and I'm out the corner, nice perfect line there. And we're going to look at this again. Once again, watch the steering angle and the brake trace. A lot of the turning is going to be done with the brake, just moving the weight to the rear, letting the car enter, slide into the apex, and then accelerate out of it. And then again for the final turn. Requires a little bit more braking, but you get the idea. Just to repeat myself one more time, the idea there is to just use the brake to help move the rear towards the outside of the car as I enter the turn, which helps rotate the car without you having to actually put much steering input into the corner. That puts you right on the edge of grip. When you're entering the corner like that, you should be just on the edge of oversteer with the car letting go, and if you turn too much, you're going to put yourself back into understeer. But you know it's perfect when you're bouncing right on that edge, and then once you get to the apex, you can get on the throttle and you just turn out of the corner nicely. I'm going to end the video off there, so I hope some of these tips may have helped you. Like I said before, I've seen plenty of these tutorials on YouTube. I haven't actually watched any of the videos, so maybe I've just repeated everything that everybody else has said. But these are just things that I've noticed that I've seen other people struggle with a little bit. I'm hoping this might have helped. So thank you all for watching, and if you have any tips, please let us know in the comments. Thank you for watching and see you soon.